Those angels he will charge for you to protect you. We're going to place it on the black rollers there. And just keep it back level at our feet. We're going to place it on the black rollers with plastic forward. Forward. Plastic forward.
I'll go in a second.
Yeah?
I'll go in a second.
I'm going to start by reading in Hebrew and translating in English the traditional passage that we begin with. Adonai ma adam v'teidoehu ben enosh v'tachshavehu. God, what is man that you recognize him, or the son of man that you deal with him? Adam lahevel dama yamav kitzel over. Man is like a breath, his days are like a passing shadow. Zramtam sheino yiyu baboker kachatzur yachalof, baboker yotzis v'cholof, la'erev yamolel v'yavesh. Yemesh no seinu bohem shivim shana, v'im viros shmonim shana, v'rabam omal v'aven. The days of our years, among them are 70, and with strength 80, in this case 100 years. Kigoz chishvana ufa linos yomenu kein hoda v'navi levav chachma. Shmor tomer e yashor ki achris le'ish shalom achalohim yiften nafshi miyad shaol ki kocheni sela hoda Adonai nefesh avodah v'lo yeshmu kol achosim bo v'yashov he'afar ala oretz kishoya v'ruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher nesana. Teach us to number our days so that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. Fix your attention on the good man, for that the end of that man is peace. But surely God will ransom my soul from the grave, for he will receive me indeed. God redeems the soul of his servants, and those who take refuge in him will not be guilty. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. One of my most pronounced memories of Mrs. Schoem wasn't in her typical guise. It was very different, and I learned a lot from it. And it took place right here. It was when Mr. Schoem, that's Dave Schoem, passed away, and we were burying him. And Mrs. Schoem came to the grave, and after everything was said, she said, she was crying, David, David. I don't know if you remember. And then she said a few more words, and then she said, David, David, David. And I had never seen her like that before. And it told me what, I knew Mrs. Schoem as a sort of like a understated, calm person. And this told me a lot more about her than I knew. That there was that big, deep well of emotion behind all of that. That was with her commitment to Dave, her husband, and in everything I think that she does. It was David, David, and now it's Lillian, Lillian, and now she's back with her David. It's an article of faith in Judaism that when we die, it's only our bodies that stop living. Our neshama, our soul, lives on. And so it's with Lillian Schoem, Leah Bas, Aharon, Aryeh, and Bracha. I think she knew that deeply, and I think that should give us comfort, and that comfort among all the many memories we have of her. This is how I originally knew Mrs. Schoem. She was always Mrs. Schoem to me. Of course, my mother, who was a good friend, called her Lillian Schoem all the time. But for me, it was Mrs. Schoem, not because Mrs. is an honorific, but because she was like in an institution in our life. She was Mrs. Schoem. My sister, who's here, would always say to me before Rosh Hashanah, before Pesach, did you call Mrs. Schoem? Mrs. Schoem was a presence, and it didn't, after a few years, it didn't take my sister to remind me to call her. I'm thinking, Mrs. Schoem, Mrs. Schoem. Growing up in my father's house, my father was the rabbi, and we as children always knew sort of vaguely or less vaguely what was going on in the synagogue, the politics, the issues. We know who were the people that gave my father tsaris, and we also knew that the Schoems were a steady presence. We know that they were we knew that they were his biggest devotees. And it was beyond the respect and the reverence that they visibly had towards him. They were also his trusted confidants, that you usually don't find that in the membership of the congregation. They were people that we knew that he could always rely on. More than congregants, they were close friends. And Alan and Ira and Mark, you know that our families were intertwined. And so you're mourning today as children, but we're also mourning as family members. So in the beginning, in my experience, it was mostly Mr. Schoem that I knew. Him I'm more comfortable calling Dave Schoem, because I knew him in that guise also. But he was the one who called us in shul. He was the one that joked with us. He was the one that, as we grew up, he got us summer jobs. At least myself, 2 years, my sister, I don't know who else. And it took, after a while, I realized that the impetus behind that was also Mrs. Schoem, although we didn't see it so much at the beginning, at least from my perspective. So after my father passed away, which is now 45 years, which is half a lifetime, so the Schoems were my mother's friend. They really showed themselves coming through. And after Dave Schoem died, Mrs. Schoem was like really such a devoted and faithful friend. I have a mental picture of Mrs. Schoem sitting up there in Har Zion in the synagogue on the second row. The second row, nobody goes to the second row in a synagogue. The Schoems didn't go originally either. But my mother, as the Rebbitzin, sat in the second row. And I would always, when I came in the later years, I always knew Mrs. Schoem would be sitting there. It wasn't natural for her, but she was a friend. She was there for my mother all the time. So that became her place in the synagogue. She would call my mother every single day. Even in the later years, when my mother was in mental decline, sometimes my mother may have not responded in kind, or, just sort of know that it was Lillian Schoem, but not really responding. It didn't matter to her. She was that constant and familiar presence for my mother. Then I started, as things went on, I started learning and realizing how much she was up on every aspect of my family. She knew all the children, all the grandchildren, all the great-grandchildren. She knows, you could ask my sister, she would ask about this grandchild and this one who had surgery, and she knew everything about what was going on. That was amazing to me. And when I would call her, she would ask me about my wife, who I just married a few years ago. She would know everything about us, about her children too. And she knew all the birthdays, everything. And I started seeing then afterwards that it was more than just our family. I had a good friend from Har Zion from the old synagogue days, who was the son of the cantor of the synagogue. When he got sick, she would always call me up. How's he doing? She was worried about him. I think for a time she was calling him up every Friday also before Shabbos to see how he's doing. And I'm sure, I know this from my sister Debbie, that it's not just people in that directly immediate area around her, but she knew the whole community. She called people here and there and everywhere. She knew what was going on with them. I always marveled that she had such a keen grasp of what was going on. She knew, the community, the dynamics. She knew the politics on a national level, and she always had, she was really very insightful all the time about what was going on. And I think she was very plain spoken, common sense, really a keen idea of what was happening, and she seemed to take everything in stride and understand this is the human condition. That's the way I related to her. I knew from my sister also she was in touch with the rabbi after my father, him and his children, and those children would be in touch with her almost every Shabbos, before every Shabbos also, from all over the world, wherever they were. And of course she was a beloved grandmother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and she was so proud of you all. I also learned the parts that I didn't know, that she made fantastic knishes and blintzes. And I also didn't know that she had a very keen sense of style. I want to tell something, it wasn't I wouldn't say that was her hallmark to have a sense of humor, but one of the things I remember, she was in our house and she was telling a story. We were talking about Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the Jewish high holidays. And she remembered to us a story from her childhood. It was very vivid. For those who don't know, on the eve of Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement, there is a custom to say what's called kaparas. So nowadays, the way we do kaparas, we say a little prayer for forgiveness, and we donate money to charity. In the olden days, in Ashkenazic circles, there's a little bit of a controversial custom. Sephardim don't do this. You would take a chicken and swing it around your head and say prayers, and then they would slaughter the chicken and give it to a poor person. So Mrs. Schoem, I remember telling us, as a little girl, she saw this and she was always afraid that the chicken would do its business while it was being waved around the head. And so what I took from that story, well, first of all, I mean, just as a general idea, it's a good lesson for everyone that, you think about Judaism, religion as a matter of cerebral arguments, ideology, and so on. The thing that makes the bond is those vivid experiences, and I could see that very much with her. But throughout her lifetime, her Jewish commitments grew, as I understand, stronger and stronger. She always kept the kosher home. They tightened up even as she went along. They went more and more to the synagogue and so on. But I think what epitomizes to me, or what I would say she was and Dave were the epitome of a particular Jewish value, and that's called Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim was, my memories of them were always driving together to go and visit the sick. This sick one, this sick one, this sick one, throughout the community. And who knows how many hundreds and thousands of people they gave strength for in their sickness. They remembered them, they were remembered. And this was such a beautiful, that went on their whole lives. I think before their commitment coming to RCM, before their being associated with us, and then as they retired and thereafter, they were always wanting to visit people. And, we sometimes think the idea, okay, I got to visit somebody, it's a value, I'll take off some time. Sometimes it feels like a pain, okay, I've got to interrupt what I'm doing and go visit somebody because they're sick, they're going to feel bad if I don't come. I felt with her and with her husband that wasn't it. This was part of life. Could I be doing anything better with my life? It wasn't an interruption of other things. That was their life, to help other people. So usually when we talk about doing things in the merit and the memory of a person, you give tzedakah, you give charity, you say Kaddish, you do Jewish learning in memory. But I feel often, and I feel in this case, if you want to really memorialize Lillian Schoem, is do a little bit of that. Because every time you do that, you're giving her merit. You're increasing, you're adding upon the thousands and thousands of people that she has helped and she cared about at the time. Just imitate that little bit, and you'll go a long way to bringing merit to the soul. Tehi nafshat tzror b'tzrach chayim.
Thank you. On behalf of my brothers, I would like to thank everyone who is here today and to those who are watching on live stream. While we would have loved to be able to all be together, we're thankful that many of you are able to participate by Zoom, a technology that even my mom conquered at her 100th birthday. Lillian Schoem, our mom, grandmother, great-grandmother, aunt, friend, mentor, and confidant to many, was born August 26, 1920, and grew up in Homestead in the Squirrel Hill area of Pittsburgh. She was the last surviving member of the 4 Valinsky brothers and sisters, and the only one who ever left Pittsburgh. While her family had been considered well off and one of the few to actually have a car, they suffered during the Depression, and she went to Washington, D.C. in her early 20s to work for the government, which provided a regular, steady income for herself and her family back in Pittsburgh. In Washington, she stayed in a boarding house like many other new arrivals to D.C., where she met our dad, who lived in the same boarding house. While they didn't necessarily like each other at first, he eventually won her over, and they were married for more than 60 years. As you all know, she had 3 sons, Alan, Ira, and me. I'm the youngest, and of course, I was the favorite one. Well, that's what she told me, but then I also found out that she told Alan and Ira the same thing, another example of the diplomacy that Mom practiced throughout her life. Her stay in the boarding house was really a look into the future of how our mom would be as she interacted with people, and how the people she met became a key part of her life and remained a part of her life. Not only did she marry one of the other boarders, but the owner of the boarding house, B. Persky, was a lifelong friend, and B. lived to be over 100 years old. When you met our mom, it was rarely a one-time occurrence. She was an active partner with our dad at Hartzion, where they were active members. As Ira mentioned, visiting the sick, the bereaved, and just reaching out to families who were new to the area to lend a helping hand or just to listen was a regular part of their lives. By doing this, Mom met hundreds of people, many elderly, and by extension, she became connected to their children and grandchildren, so that years later, as she and my dad got older, and many of the people in the extended family became friends. A lot of you know that I always joked, but actually was serious, that I didn't want her meeting any of my friends, because once she did, they then became her friends, and somehow she found out more about you than you ever told me. Many of you are here today, thank you, and some of you are watching. I know she appreciated each of you, and I was happy to share her with you. In befriending their first rabbi at Congregation Hartzion, Joseph Brandress, of blessed memory, they became a confidant of the rabbi and his wife Perla, of blessed memory, as Ira said. And in later years, as Perla and Mom got older, Mom became even more connected with their children, including their daughter Debbie. Debbie's been a constant and supportive friend to our mom for many years, and I know Mom valued the relationship they had. A number of years ago, our mom also expressed a desire to have Debbie's brother Ira lead the service today, and again, the family connections run strong and deep, and we appreciate Ira leading today's service. Upon the arrival of another new rabbi, Reuben Landman, again, my parents were there for the rabbi's family. While his children were very young when they arrived, through the love and warmth of our mom, Rabbi Landman's daughter, Hannah, and Ellie, son Ellie, now grown with families of their own, called each Friday over the last several years to wish my mom a good Shabbos, and so she could be updated on the family's lives. And again, she always looked forward to these calls. 50 years ago, a 12-year-old French girl whose family was connected to a family my dad met when he was stationed in France during World War II, came to visit the USA and stay with our parents for a few days to see Washington, D.C. Fortunately, our dad spoke some French, at least enough to help this 12-year-old girl understand more about the history of Washington. The key part of this story, however, is to this day, 50 years later, Mom and Ghislaine continue to be friends, and they talk even as she grew up, learned English, moved to California, married, and had a family of her own. Ghislaine, in discussing Mom, told us that Mom was her mentor and friend, and when they talked, Mom always gave good advice, and that has worked out well for her and her family. This was a constant theme in our mom's life, and one that became more evident to us over the last 20 years or so. Mom had a whole network of people that she met through the years. You may have heard about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I think if someone did the research on Mom, she would far outnumber his contacts. They were global in nature, including friends in France, Switzerland, Israel, and Barcelona. These contacts included nieces and nephews and other relatives and friends in many different states and cities throughout the United States. There were no boundaries for the warmth and love she extended to her family and friends. Mom could walk into a room of strangers and walk out knowing nearly everyone's life story, and remarkably remember the details even years later after not seeing the people for some time. As she aged, she looked forward to regular phone calls from Rochelle, from Rhonda, from Jackie, from Susan, and from each of the grandchildren, where she could catch up on the latest family event or milestone, and again remarkably remember every detail of previous calls or events. And while the calls may have been short, since she always let you know when she was ready to hang up, you could see that it was always giving her a reason to continue and a reason to smile. This past Wednesday night, as Lindsay was driving home from work, as was her custom, she called Mom to tell her about her day. And again, Mom, just hearing Lindsay's voice, put a smile on her face, and she knew that was okay. All was okay. While Mom couldn't respond, the smile on her face said it all. And while she certainly loved the phone calls from all the grandchildren and the friends over the past year, it's been difficult with very few visitors. Pre-pandemic, she always loved the frequent visits from Scott when he was teaching students near her house. It was a chance for her to serve him food, talk some sports and music, and just be a grandmother. She loved cooking to the excess with family holiday meals and being able to have as many of her children and grandchildren around her at all times. Mom also loved to travel, and we were fortunate to have been able to take her every summer for a vacation to Florida to visit Brad and his family over the last 10 years or so. She loved the trips and so looked forward to them that sometimes a week before the departure, she would get her luggage from the basement and pack everything in a very orderly and organized fashion and be ready to go. Never any forgotten items on those trips. And she and our dad also had the opportunity to go on cruises and travel abroad, so she became quite a seasoned traveler through the years. And she always looked forward to trips, even if it was just for a few days. The other perk that she enjoyed was she was able to go right through security and be the first on the plane, and she always liked that perk of being older. So just 9 months ago, she participated in her 100th birthday by Zoom, and we had a full schedule of people to talk to. So many wanted to speak to her that we had to limit the call for 10 minutes. We had to limit the call to just 10 minutes or so we can get everyone in. As it turns out, we started early in the day, and she was still on Zoom well into the early evening with family and friends from around the world. During Passover, just a few short weeks ago, again by Zoom, she started reading during the Seder, as is our custom, to go around the table, but this time by Zoom. And in a strong voice that we hadn't heard in a while, started reading from the Haggadah and just wouldn't stop. Seeing her interacting in the service was an added gift, since we could see the decline over the last 9 months as her age finally caught up with her. I also want to recognize and publicly thank Mom's caregivers over the last couple of years who treated our mom with respect and dignity and provided her a safe and comfortable environment so that she could stay in the house she lived in for over 60 years. Thank you, Mary, Emmy, Nora, and Betty, for the love and support you provided to our mom on a daily basis. For those of you who don't know Betty, she also took care of our dad 17 years ago. And true to form, my mom became friends with Betty and maintained that friendship since the time she helped our dad. When Mom needed help, she turned again to Betty. She was there to assist in caring for my mom every weekend. Knowing the connection Mom had with Betty through my dad, it certainly made Mom's transition much easier, being with someone she knew and trusted and liked. Mom had a good long life, and she loved being able to help when she could, whether it was through advice, babysitting grandchildren, or helping any of us achieve a dream or goal. She leaves behind 9 grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, and always looked forward to their calls and visits. Loved seeing the pictures that were sent, and she looked at those pictures on a daily basis. It's hard to sum up 100 years in just a few minutes. I know this was long, and it's hot out. We wanted to give you an idea of the kindness and special warmth she provided to family and friends, and how she maintained so many new friendships throughout her life. Thanks again for honoring our mom by joining us today. She'll be missed by all. If anyone else would like to say a few words briefly about Mom, now's the time to do it before we conclude the service. So if you come up, please. Thank you.
I'll be brief. My name is Marvin Waldman. My father was a Rabbi Emeritus at Congregation Hartzion. I didn't really know David and Lillian too well in the early years, but in 1981 my father suffered a grievous injury that left him a quadriplegic for the last 5 years of his life. And I can't remember a Saturday after my father got ill that David and Lillian didn't show up at the hospital, at the nursing homes during those 5 years. And it was something I know my father was looking forward to and my mother was looking forward to. And after my father passed away in 1986, again, Lillian's mission was visiting my mom on Shabbos and bringing comfort to them. Can't speak enough of what we feel for David and Lillian.
Okay. We're going to now proceed with the burial. After we lower the casket, it's a mitzvah to participate in the burial. The custom is when you pick up the shovel, you push it back. The first couple of things clods you throw in backwards. It's a way of saying reluctance. Hard to say goodbye. So. When the casket is covered, we're going to say a final prayer, Kaddish, and that will conclude.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you like the second shovel on the other side as well? You're welcome to take from that side as well.
People could use another shovel.
Okay. So we're just going to get in that corner, right on that side, where the fruit's going to pass. Do it on this side. Yeah. There's a couple crosses over on that side. Gentlemen, I think we're good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Concluding prayer, Sidu Kadin, it's called. Atzur Tamid Paulo, Kichol Rachav Mishpat, El Emunah V'Yein Ovel, Tzadik V'Yasharhu, Atzur Tamid B'Chol Poal, Mi Omar Lo Matifol, Hashalit B'Mata V'Mal, Meimi Simachaya, Mori D'Shol V'Yal, Atzur Tamid B'Chol Masa, Mi Omar Elov Matase, Omer V'Yoseh Chesed Chinam Lanu Sase, V'Schus HaNegad Keseh Hakshiv V'Aseh. The rock, perfect is his work, for all his paths are justice, a God of faith without iniquity, righteous and fair as he. The rock, perfect in every work, who can say to him, what have you done? He rules below and above, brings death and resuscitates, brings down to the grave and raises up. Tzadi b'chol rocha v'atzur tomim merach ha'payim olerachamim chamon no v'chusno alavos uvonim kilocha adon hasichos v'rachamim tzadik ato adonai lahamisu lahachiyos Asher b'yadcha pikdon kol ruchos cholilo lecha zofreinu l'minkos v'yunai necha b'rachamim oleinu tukos kilocha adon harachamim v'asichos Odamim ben shana yiyeh o elef shanim yichiyeh ma yisron lo kolo haya yiyeh Baruch dayan ha'emes me'misu mechayeh baruchu ki emes dino mishote b'kol b'yeino Mishalem lo adam chashbono v'dino v'akol lishmo hadoya litain Yitenu Yodanu Adonai Ki Tzedek Mishpatecha Tzidkad Fit Tzdak B'Dovracha V'Siska V'Shovtecha V'Ein L'Harer Achar Midas Shovtecha Tzadik Atah Adonai V'Osho Mishpatecha Dayan Emes Shofet Emes V'Tzedek V'Emes Baruch Dayan Emes Shekol Mishpatov Tzedek V'Emes Nefesh Kol Chai Yodecha Tzedek Mola Yeminecha Yodecha Rachim Al Plitas Sonzoneh Yodecha V'Somar Lamala Cheref Yodecha Gadol ha'etz v'arat ha'aliyah asher einecha pekufos al kol darchei b'nei adam v'aseis leish k'dracha v'chri ma'alolov v'agik yosho Adonai tzuri v'lo asapo Adonai nosan v'Adonai lokachi yishem Adonai merch v'hu v'achum yichaper v'lo yashkiv scroll v'ashavho v'lo yorek tomoso. The soul of all the living is in your hand. Righteousness fills your right hand and your power. Have mercy on the remnant of the sheep of your hand. Your eyes are open upon all the ways of the children of man, to give man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his deeds, to declare that Hashem, God is just, my rock in whom there is no wrong. Hashem gave and Hashem took. Blessed be the name of Hashem. You say the prophet. Amen. El Mole Rachamim, Shofein Bamromim, Amitzei Menuchon Echon Al Kampei Ashkina, Tumalos, Kedoshim, Toharim, Kazor, Roki Amazirim, Es Nishmas, Leah, Bazari, Bas Aaron, Aryeh, Shahochali, Olama, Bagler, Shinobin, Stokaviadas, Fos Nishmasah, Gan Eden Tehei Menuchasa, L'chein Bala Rachamim Yasti Yeho B'Seiser Knochav Li'olamim, B'Tzor Achayim Es Nishmasa, Adonai Hu Nachalasa, V'Sanuach Al Mishkava, V'Shalom V'Nomar, Amen. This concludes the service. The tradition is to form two lines so that the Mormons can walk back, and as they walk through, you say to them, may God comfort you among all Mormons, Zion and Jerusalem.
I have two lines between here and the front of the hearse. Two parallel lines face one another, and on this side of me, and back down towards the road right there. Some folks do stuff over here on this side with three ways.
Yeah, he's a It's called Atzur Tamidu Paulo, Kifol Rachav Mishpat, El Emunah V'Yein Avel, Tzadik V'Yasharhu, Atzur Tamid B'Chol Poal, Mi Omar Lo Matifol, Hashalit B'Mata V'Mal, Meimi Simachaya, Mori D'Shol V'Yal, Atzur Tamid B'Chol Masa, Mi Omar Elov Mataseh, Omer V'Yoseh Chesed Finon Lanu Saseh, V'Zchus HaNegad Keseh Hakshiva Raseh. The rock, perfect is his work, for all his paths are justice, a God of faith without iniquity, righteous and fair as he. The rock, perfect in every work, who can say to him, what have you done? He rules below and above, brings death and resuscitates, brings down to the grave and raises up.